Hello, everyone. For those who don't know me yet, I'm Megan Lebeda, a program manager here at Kirkwood Corporate Training, and thanks for joining us for our August webinar. Today, we have Sarah Hermanson joining us. Sarah is the founder of One Above HR. Sarah is an entrepreneur, farmer. We were just talking about flower farming, actually, and human resources professional with over 27 years of experience helping Iowa businesses. She's a natural consultant who guides leaders to build healthy, joyful workplaces through creative solutions and efficient processes. Today, Sarah is presenting on coaching for success, which is also the session she'll be leading for us later this year in our program called The Bridge. So Sarah, I'm going to hand it right over to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Great to see everybody today. I am going to share my screen so that we can kick off our presentation here. There we go. All right. Hopefully everybody can see that. So just to give you a little bit more detail about my background, so we get to know each other a little bit here today. I started my HR career as a recruiter. Honestly, I fell into it. I think a lot of people end up in HR by accident. And so at the time, I didn't even know what a recruiter was. I thought it was military recruiting. I had a ton of questions, and it ended up being an incredible career. I had an outstanding mentor who from the very beginning was all about reading books and learning and professional development and emotional intelligence. And so I grew an enormous amount under her mentoring. And I loved recruiting in the sense that I was an executive recruiter. So yes, that term headhunter probably does apply. I promise I was really, really nice. And I spent time in IT, finance, but most of my career was on the manufacturing side. And so I have filled positions with every title you can imagine, from animal scientist to engineer to plant managers, presidents, really across an organizational continuum, really focused on Iowa-based businesses. And while I loved that, I loved getting into an organization and understanding what do they do, who do they sell their product to, how do they make it, what's their culture, why would they be a great place for someone to go to work? And then getting to know an individual and helping to understand what motivates them and what drives them, and being able to find organizations and people that fit together. What I found over time was I didn't feel like I was really fixing the real problem, in that I had a lot of organizations I worked with year after year, and I got to know them, and I got just far enough into the organization to see what was maybe broken internally and what was causing some of their turnover or performance issues. And I left really wanting to understand how I could have a greater influence on organizational health. And I had an incredible opportunity. I went to work for a startup company. If you've heard of ClickStop in Urbana, they're Iowa's fastest growing e-commerce company. And I was employee number 22. And they let me do things I was entirely unqualified for, and it was so much fun. And I began my career with them really in a process efficiency role, going into different departments and helping to create structure and process and training, doing some organizational development, and ended up helping them hire 200 people over 5 years. And we grew to multiple facilities and just added additional e-commerce sites. It was a ton of fun. But the best part of my time at ClickStop was I was part of a leadership team that crafted our core values and our culture. And we wanted to have fun, but we wanted to have a very high performance, accountability oriented culture. And it was so much fun to see that you can actually create that, and that all the head knowledge, all the learning and the reading and the studying I'd done, I could actually put that into practice in a real life environment. So that's why I started my own company. One Above HR has the goal of creating joy-filled work environments that are high-performing and fun. And so I do a lot of speaking and training and consulting with organizations to help them pursue that kind of culture and engagement with their team. So today we're going to dive into coaching for success. And so I want to start with, what does success mean? Because if we don't have a definition individually, I think it is different for every person, then this whole concept of coaching for success and leadership success doesn't really help us, kind of go anywhere here. And so I'm a big believer in taking time to do that individual self-assessment work of what drives you, what motivates you, where do you want to be in 5 years? Do you have a mentor? Have you really analyzed why you want to go where you want to go in your career, what motivates you about pursuing that additional skill set or learning or development or title or role? Because sometimes what I find is I feel like early in our career, we feel like we're just supposed to get into leadership or we're supposed to pursue management. And then when we arrive there, we realize that it's really maybe not what we were called to do. And so I think that self-assessment of what brings us joy, what energizes us when we're having the most fun at work, what are we doing? What does that look like? Why does that bring us joy? And so I want to make sure that before we get too much into what I consider to be some of the cornerstone leadership attributes of success, that we're not skipping the fact that the self-assessment, the individual assessment of what is success and why am I heading the direction I'm heading is a key to that, because we can't pursue these other things unless we're individually aligned and pursuing things for the right reasons. So again, do you have a personal growth plan? Do you have a happiness plan? I'm a big believer that we aren't just looking at work, we're looking at our entire life and all of the different things that should bring us joy and happiness. And so just want to throw out some questions and some conversations to get us thinking about how do I define success and where am I going and what's my why before we lean into the next topic. So normally, if we were face to face in a workshop setting, we'd have some fun with these questions. And I challenge everybody to share, because generally speaking, we have people in the room that have probably done some of this inner work, and the ahas, the redirection, some of the learning opportunities that we get when we do self-assessment can be really powerful. So the 5 key attributes that we're going to highlight today are going to be strategic alignment, emotional intelligence, having a coaching mindset, communication mastery, and adaptability and change. So starting with strategic alignment, here's why I think this is so key. In fact, I would call it the key cornerstone, is that if you are in an organization and you don't know what the organizational goals are, then you can't be successful, because your function, your team, your day-to-day goals should tie to the bigger organizational goals and outcomes. And so if we have strategic alignment, then we know that we're all running in the same direction with the same momentum and the same focus. And all too often, this is one of the outcomes of process analysis and team analysis that I uncover, is that somebody's got a misalignment and they're going this direction and the organization wants them to go this direction, but it's because we didn't get clarity on the get-go. And so that ability to sit down with leadership to have a very clear understanding of what are the organizational goals, how will we know, how are we measuring that strategy, and how does your team or function fit into achieving those goals, and what momentum you need to be building in order to be a part of that. The other key of this is, if you're a leader, how are you articulating that to your team? Because everyone should know that alignment. Everyone should have a sense of those goals. We should be celebrating milestones. We should be understanding that what we do every day matters in the bigger picture strategy of the organization. We need to help connect the dots. I have a lot of leaders that say, well, they know what that goal is. They were in the meeting where we talked about that kickoff, or when we laid out our organizational goals. And I'll say, but did you sit down and help them see how their day-to-day function influences the ability for us to achieve that goal? And they'll be like, no, they can connect the dots. Do not assume that your team members are connecting those dots. Don't assume that they understand the importance of their role in achieving that goal. That's part of our leadership responsibility. All right, so that's strategic alignment. Any questions? I know we've got some comment opportunity if somebody had something they wanted me to slow down or repeat. So, all right. So, emotional intelligence. Honestly, we could do 90 minutes on just this topic. And if we were in person, I would hand out an emotional intelligence assessment to each of you, and we would take a minute and we would go through the 25 questions, and you would gauge yourself on your emotional intelligence abilities, and we'd lean into what that opportunity is individually to develop our emotional intelligence. So I love this as a topic. I think it's incredibly powerful. All of the research and studies show us that 75% of successful leaders possess a very high EQ. So what is it? If you haven't heard about emotional intelligence before, it's the ability to recognize, understand, and manage your own emotions, and then influence the emotions of others. So we all have IQ. We all have a baseline intelligence. Generally speaking, studies have shown us that IQ doesn't change and grow over time, that we have a limited ability to reach just an intelligence level. The beauty of EQ is that it's plastic and we're growing and developing it all the time. And with care and thoughtfulness, we can dramatically increase our EQ. And I believe it's the difference between amazing leaders and average leaders. So, EQ starts with self-awareness. So, what am I feeling? And why am I feeling it? And the key to this is that all the emotions are good. We want to place, anger's bad, jealousy's bad, greed, envy's bad. The reality is all of the emotions are good. It's what we do with them that usually gets us into trouble. And so recognizing why am I feeling this way and calling that emotion, giving it a name and being able to recognize an emotion. And then there's a space there. There's a space between feeling and action and leveraging that gap to then decide, is this emotion valid? Should I be feeling this way? What were the motives? If someone did something that caused me to feel this way, is that what they intended? Did they intend to harm me, to anger me, to frustrate me? Or am I placing emotion where it doesn't belong, which most of us do on a regular basis. And so harnessing that ability to know the emotion, name the emotion, and regulate and decide what to do with it is the first step in emotional intelligence. So self-awareness, what am I feeling and why? Emotional management, is it valuable? How do I want to deal with that emotion? Is it worth dealing with? Is it true? Is it real? And do I need to do something to repair or call it out if there actually was a harm that was created there? The second side, the more complicated side, in my opinion, is the social emotional awareness. So understanding how someone else might be feeling, reading and perceiving their body language, their behavior, the words they're choosing to use accurately, and then having relationship management in order to take what you're perceiving and increase the positive relationship that you want to have with that human being. And that can be difficult because sometimes we can misread those cues. Sometimes somebody's tired, or again, they've got something going on at home, and we might misread that it's us in that relationship. And so there's a lot of techniques and abilities of how do we kind of check in and like, hey, I just noticed that we didn't seem to be communicating well today. Is everything okay? You're not assuming that you've offended someone when you don't feel you've done anything offensive. And so there's, again, we could spend hours on training and going deep dive into skills around emotional intelligence, but it's crucial, not only for our individual happiness. The more time I've spent in this, the more I recognize that I feel a lot of emotions that aren't accurate, that no one has intended to offend me, and that I'm placing emotion where it doesn't belong. And so I've been a happier person. I think the power of being able to acknowledge and call out emotions and name emotions, teaching that to my kids has been a transformative thing for them to regulate and recognize their own emotions. And then certainly in our relationships at work, all too often, some of our biggest mistakes have been in high emotions situations where we've reacted and responded in a way that wasn't appropriate because we got hijacked by our emotions. And so the ability to really develop these skills can be incredibly transformative. I've got an emotion wheel. If I can find it here in my stack, there it is. So this is a picture, if you can see it, of all the different emotions and all the different words we use to describe emotions. And so there's so much power in leaning into this as a topic. And again, if we were in person, I'd have you do the assessment. We'd have a ton of fun figuring out how they're, kind of where your strengths or weaknesses are on the 4 primary categories of emotional intelligence. So leaders with high emotional intelligence are happier. They tend to have happier and more engaged teams, and they do way better at managing conflict. So, coaching mindset, number 3 on the list. So, a coaching mindset is simply the philosophy of saying, okay, I'm going to shift from being problem solving oriented to be people developing oriented. All too often, we go into an environment and we look at process and output. What do I need to do? How do I need to achieve it? How fast do I need to achieve it? What are the KPIs in what we do? And we simply are slaying dragons and trying to increase productivity and solve problems around productivity. When the reality is, if we shift some of our, again, we're not abandoning that effort. That still has to happen on a day-to-day basis. But we're going to shift our focus to what if I develop the people around me and I increase their skills and ability and I invest in their development? How does that also create more performance and productivity and momentum versus me just micromanaging the productivity of what we need to achieve? And so coaching conversations build ownership, they build confidence, they build additional productivity and performance. Um, the part I love most is that I believe what's missing in many of our workplaces today is deep, meaningful, thoughtful connection. And that we're so busy slaying the dragon and fighting the good fight and getting the work done that we don't actually know the people that we're next to and that we're working with. We don't know them on a level where when we go through hard things that we can trust them because we're so busy, we don't take time to build those connections. And so a coaching mindset does that. It's asking powerful questions. It's listening to understand what's really going on and what someone's motivated by and what they're excited about and how we can invest in their growth and development. It's giving constructive feedback. If we care about people and we want them to grow, we're going to tell them how they can do better. In that effort, we're modeling that integrity because that feedback needs to go both ways. And so there's going to be times when in that coaching mindset, we need to be really open to how do we grow so that we can be a better leader for our team. It also naturally fosters psychological safety, which again, we could spend 90 minutes on that topic of how do we create trust on such a level that they know that they can say anything without fear of reprisal or punishment. And therefore, we get more creative ideas, more innovation, more productivity, and more engagement out of our team. So I'm a huge believer in developing that coaching mindset. I think it sets leaders apart, and I see leaders that really invest in this ability to coach their team and develop others are the ones that are often promoted into executive leadership functions because they're creating teams that can actually, really function without them because of the ownership mentality that happens in those departments. All right. Communication mastery. I think it goes without saying that this is the hardest part of every one of our jobs, is that the ability to learn how to communicate, to learn to listen, to seek to understand, to ask better questions, to slow down and really connect and understand what people around you are saying, as well as let's add the diversity quotient, let's add the multiple generation quotient of the fact we might have 5 generations in a workforce and their worldview and how they communicate and their perception of and ideas of what needs to happen in the workplace. It is so challenging to be a great communicator. And so I don't believe that we ever arrive, and I don't think we can ever stop polishing and getting feedback and seeking out learning opportunities. The person I've been binging lately is Vanessa Von Edwards. She's got a ton of things on public speaking, presentation, charisma, just how to be a better communicator. And so, anytime you can find somebody that's a great thought leader on communication, we should be consuming that. So first and foremost, our communication needs to align with leadership and company culture. We need to understand the goals. We need to understand the mission, vision, and values. And we need to understand the core values, and we should be talking about those. It should be an active thing that we're also sharing with our team so that we're aligned. There needs to be balance around clarity and confidentiality. That's one of the stickiest things. I do so much coaching on what can I say, what can I share, because there's some confidentiality lines sometimes in leadership, especially when it comes to performance or terminations or the sticky part of leading. And so being able to communicate in challenging times with respect, frankly, with love, with care, I think people can forgive us a lot if they know that we care. I also think that it's not just the sit down and the one-on-one or the team meeting. I think we need to develop communication mastery in all the different forms. I think we need to be good writers. I thank God for Grammarly and ChatGPT and OpenAI and their ability to take something I've written and help me polish those messages. But there's also the aspect of how are we listening? How are we asking good questions? I love people that ask good questions. Um, and then obviously many times as leaders, we're in situations where we're doing public speaking and we're having to convey a message and influence and get buy-in and get people excited about something. How are we doing that? How are we developing those skills? I'm a big storyteller. I believe that stories resonate with us. They create connection. Whenever I get an opportunity to tell a story about one of my 5 kids, or we've got a pumpkin farm that we manage on the side, there's just something about that I always find a connection point with somebody, and those connections are what make us stronger when we have to go through challenging times together. So, bringing up the last topic, which by no means is a small one, is adaptability and change. Well, hang on. I want to go back to one more on communication mastery. I challenge you each to take a minute and think about how you would evaluate your ability to listen, your ability to write written communication, your ability to share feedback or receive feedback, your ability to conduct training, your ability to do public speaking and get in front of a group of people with a microphone, and then your ability to inspire or influence others. And I think the process of evaluating that and ranking that, and seeing, okay, which of these areas are things maybe that you need to look at some growth and development, or find a mentor, or again, a YouTube or a podcast or a book. I think that we can never, ever stop polishing and perfecting our communication mastery. So thanks for going back there for a minute with me. All right, adaptability and change. So the capacity to thrive in today's workplace, this is absolutely required. And I think we're all a little exhausted by it. I know sometimes I am, because it feels like the pace and speed and insanity of change is accelerating. I don't know who's driving, who's got the brick on the accelerator right now. But we can make a list of all of the different things that are influencing the rapid and chaotic change that we're experiencing in our workplaces. And that's not going to go away. We're not going to be able to hit the pause button. We're not going to be able to slow down. We're not going to be able to say, okay, once we get through this, we'll be able to figure out what new normal looks like. I don't think there's a normal anymore. I think it is just living in the present moment and celebrating the wins that we have, the little wins that we have every day in the journey of the roller coaster ride that we're on. So I had a mentor one time tell me that I can either be uncomfortable or uncomfortable. And I looked at her and I was like, wait, you just said the same word twice. And she meant to say it that way, because you can either be uncomfortable and you can embrace the change and you can get on board, or you can be uncomfortable and be stuck and be left behind. Both of them are uncomfortable. It's choosing which one you want to be a part of. So I believe that leaders particularly have to champion change. We have to go first sometimes in our ability to adapt. And the thing that is often missing is our openness about how uncomfortable it is. And so I think we need to be somebody that's okay about talking about the uncertainty, talking about the discomfort, talking about the frustration. Because if our people are feeling those emotions and we're ignoring them and we're trying to Pollyanna and rainbow it of like, everything's going to be great, and yet there's discomfort, I think we're missing an opportunity to build stronger connection by talking about that, hey, I know this is hard. I know it's frustrating. I know that there's been a lot of change, and the exhaustion level, the frustration level, that those things, it's been a lot lately. And to just lean into that, give it a name, call it out, and then decide that we're going to choose good. We're going to choose joy. We're going to choose to celebrate the successes of how great we're doing getting through the hard. Because I believe that is what a leader does. A leader doesn't deny the fact that we have to be adaptable and change. A leader leads us through having to be adaptable and embrace the change. So along the lines of that, when we go deep, when we get vulnerable, when we ask those tough questions about how we're adapting to change, about the hard part of change, when we when we get emotions out in the light on a table in a meeting and we're honest about what's really happening and the frustrating parts of our jobs, I believe we also forge much deeper trust. I have a lot of people that tell me that they feel that their boss is like Superman. He's in the suit with the glasses on, pretending to be okay, instead of, being real and authentic and showing that he's a little bit of a hot mess like the rest of us. And so recognize that sometimes that vulnerability and that ability to be real about the hard is what's going to deepen the trusting relationship and the connectivity with everyone else that we're going through that transition and that hard part together. So um, I'm I'm a high trust person. I tend to be an innovator. I really love new things. I'm drive people crazy with all of the things that I want to try, or suggestions or ideas or ways we can have better meetings, all of those things. And so I'm very sensitive to the fact that sometimes it can be hard. To be around somebody who's pushing you to embrace change, to be adaptable, to want to lead change, to want to hear the latest and greatest new idea. When hey, we just got done with one, can't we get a break? But I believe that we are in a day and an age when the ability to be a growth mindset person, to be resilient, to look for the how do we say yes to this? How can we do it? Instead of having some of that inclination to try to kick down the new idea or poke holes in the new idea. I'm all about discernment. I'm all about healthy, how do we do it well? But I think that sometimes in our fatigue, we can go to no instead of going yes, but, or yes, and. And so I think that, there's a lot of ability to kind of self-assess here. When a new idea comes up, what's your default response? Do you say yes and take a deep breath and figure out how we can make it better? Just how do you approach a new idea or another change, or the ability that you have to lead your team through another change? And do you have a good mindset about it? What's the voice in your head or on your shoulder say when another change comes across your desk? Because that growth mindset is going to be key. And whether you know it or not, people know. They see your reaction. They know what your real gut is saying. And so we have to choose to develop that growth mindset. So one of the key things that I tell leaders, if you are in a high innovation environment, or if you're in an executive leadership role where you're always getting these new ideas and you're trying to figure out how do we do all these things, is my favorite skill set and analogy for us to use is the parking lot. And so I hope that you use this. I hope this becomes a really beneficial tool that you can go implement. And so here's what happens. If you're in a high innovation, or you've got that ideator who's always bringing you a new idea, and yet you're trying to figure out how do you do these? When do you do these? How do I keep track of all these ideas? I have a whiteboard, and I have it drawn out like a parking lot. And then I have roads going in and roads going out. And every new idea goes in the parking lot because it needs to sit there and it needs to ruminate a little bit. And then I decide which ideas get to go out on the road to get implemented. We can't get them all out on the road at the same time. Then we're going to have a traffic jam. We also have to know where we're going and why we're going there. So some of these ideas might be really great ideas, but they might not get us to our current goal. They might actually distract us from the current journey and the current goal. So that car might need to stay in the parking lot until we achieve the current goal and the current journey. And so from that standpoint, it allows us to see how many ideas do we have out on the road, that therefore, are we executing? Are we finishing? Are those getting to the destination before we take another car out of the parking lot and put it on the journey? Because I work with a lot of leaders who are huge innovators and huge ideators, and they're constantly throwing ideas at their teams, not recognizing that there's too many cars on the highway, and that we're all in a traffic jam, and that we haven't actually finished or executed anything because we're throwing too many new ideas at them. So this is a really, really good tool. It's a great tool for brainstorming. It's a great tool to make sure that your team and your ideas are also aligned with, again, that that strategy and the corporate goal and the organizational goal of what we're supposed to achieve. It doesn't mean we don't sometimes take those further up the food chain. If there's a really incredible opportunity that should also have resources assigned to it that don't reach our current goal and strategy, but there's thoughtfulness that needs to go into those kinds of decisions. So I did want to grab chat just for a minute. I've got a question. How does a leader take input and be able to spin it, not just listen to it, but take action on feedback that is uncomfortable? Oh, that is a hard one, Brittany. So I think the key is to figure out what's the motive. So when someone gives me uncomfortable feedback, I want to listen and I want to acknowledge first. Thank you for sharing that with me. I know that took a boldness to be able um, to step forward, to share that feedback, to share that with me. And a lot of times I'll say to them, do you have a solution? Do you have an idea? Do you have a different way that we should be doing? I want to get them involved in that feedback session. And it might just be a matter of, hey, let me think on that. Can we meet about it again next week? It's not always a scenario where we need to go solve it right now. Sometimes we simply need to listen and process. And in fact, I think most of the time, any uncomfortable feedback is always, the outcome is always better the slower that we go, because sometimes our first idea isn't a great idea. Does that make sense? I've got another one here from Sarah. How can we reestablish stability and strong teamwork following a recent department turnover and reconstruction? Oh, that is a tough one. So I'm a big believer in that we have to acknowledge it. So I would set the team down and I would have us talk about the fact that it's been a tough season and that we all really hate for people to leave. In a dream world, we would all go to work someplace and we would all stay forever and ever and ever, and we wouldn't have to face saying goodbye to someone or seeing someone transition and seeing turnover happen and just the loss that comes with that, because it is a loss. It's a loss of a relationship. It's a loss of the efficiency and function within our team. I think we need to speak truth to what your team just went through. And then we need to say, okay, we're going to feel those things. We're going to acknowledge these things. And then we're going to choose to move forward. But let's choose to move forward united as a team. And so that means we need to get to know these new people. And so do some game playing, have some team lunches, do some things to build unity and connection. Tell your stories about how you ended up where you're at in your career, where you went to college, why you love working here, what your strength is, what your gift is. Make sure you're hearing that from the new people. There's an aspect of needing to begin again, because while much of the team knows each other, you probably have new people that don't, and we have to reconstruct that team unity and that connection that might be missing now with new people and new activities. So thank you so much for the questions. Please pop those into the chat if you've got anything that's kind of popped in your mind here today that we need to cover. So I want to just run back through the 5 that we hit. So we talked about strategic alignment. We need to have this alignment with the organizational goals and the vision for where the company wants to take us. I then believe we need to have emotional intelligence, because as a leader, if we can't acknowledge and know our own emotions and know what we want to do with those and how we're going to manage relationships and recognize emotions in others, we're not going to have the strongest team or the deepest, most meaningful relationships in our workplace. Third, we're going to have a coaching mindset. Not that we're not going to solve problems. We're still going to have some productivity mindset, but I want to have a 60-40. I want to be 60% coaching and investing and developing the people around me. I want people who are going to be able to do better than me. I want to build my succession because that's going to make our team stronger. And so having that coaching mindset is 3. And then we're looking at communication mastery. How do we look at all the different ways that we're communicating and continue to grow and develop skill sets and how we communicate? And then we just reviewed the adaptability and change of how do we embrace change? How do we champion innovation? How do we walk alongside our team members in change? And that innovation piece of all the ideation that we need to be doing these days, how do we manage and kind of harness that from that standpoint? So from an implementation standpoint, I would have you Look at your emotional intelligence. Where can you grow there? Evaluate your communication skills, like we talked about, all those different areas. Is there an area you need to work on growth and development? Are you a coach or are you a manager? And how can you develop your coaching mindset? Um, I'm a big believer in having 3 key relationships. I want to have a mentor, and a mentor is someone who's helping me develop day-to-day skills. I want to have an advisor. That advisor's helping me to develop my future strategy of how I'm going to grow to reach 3, 5 year, not day to day, the longer term aspect of things. They're advising me on a bigger picture. They might already be in the role that I want to have someday. And then I want to have a sponsor. The sponsor is somebody who doesn't maybe work in my organization or used to work in my organization, who can help me see what's going on in the industry around me so that I can continue to be bigger picture mindset and a leader that isn't just intrinsically focused in this little tiny fishbowl. I want to be able to see the forest through the trees, and an advisor, a sponsor helps us to do that. So I'd encourage you to look at those different relationships that you have within the organization, or again, externally outside the organization, to make sure that you've got people speaking into your career development. We can't see what we can't see. We've all got an area of blinders, and we need people that are willing to be honest and truthful with us. I'm sorry, I think I accidentally moved us forward with my mouse, which is perfect because we're here at implementation recommendations. So as you can tell from my mindset, nonstop learning is, I believe, a requirement in today's day and age. I don't care how you do it. I used to be a hard copy book person. As you can tell from behind me, I still am. I love to buy books. I probably have a mild addiction. In fact, I'm in a period where I've told myself I can't buy any more books because I need to finish reading some that I have. But I also enjoy YouTube, and I love a good podcast, and I have several influencers that I follow because of their thought leadership. And so there's so many awesome ways to learn, that the whole aspect of I don't have time to read isn't a good excuse anymore. There are so many micro ways for you to develop additional skills and abilities, and it's a requirement for long-term growth and development. And then I'm a feedback junkie. So at the end of this, you're going to have an opportunity to fill out a survey and to be able to share feedback on what you liked and what you didn't like, what I can do better. Did I go too fast? Did I talk with my hands too much? Any of those kinds of things. I want to make sure you're getting feedback, because again, I can't see what I can't see, and that goes for you as well. And so finding creative ways to ask those questions, to make sure that we're hearing from people, how we're landing on them, how we're communicating, how we're showing up in a meeting, what our body language is saying that we don't realize it's saying. All of those things of getting feedback regularly are keys to us even figuring out, oh, right, what do I need to go learn? Because what might that blind spot be? So I have got, I think, a few more questions in the chat, and open to more here. We've got about 10 minutes. So if anybody else has got another question. All right. Megan says, do you have any recommendations for middle managers who are trying to have a coaching mindset for their team, but aren't receiving a coaching mindset from their management and leadership? That's quite common, actually. And it looks like Chanda is saying, yeah, good question, Megan. So I think there's an aspect of we have to learn to feed ourselves. That while ideally everyone in an organization has a coaching mindset, and everyone in the organization figures out how to come alongside and invest in your growth and development and ask you deep, meaningful questions, it's just not realistic, especially in the multi-generational, diverse workplaces that we have. Not everybody's grown up and is going to learn to be the same kind of leader. And so we have to learn to feed ourselves. And so if you have a leader who isn't coaching you, who isn't asking those deep, meaningful questions, you have a responsibility to yourself to go find that mentor or advisor who can be that coach for you. I also believe in coaching up. So if you have an aha and you figure out something about yourself or your career trajectory or what your gifting is, or you've tried a leadership technique with your team and it's worked really great, share that with your leadership proactively so that they grow from you. Some of my major growth and aha things have been from people that I supervised who shared with me something that they tried and I wouldn't have thought of. And so there's this aspect of sometimes we just think top down, where I believe the leading up and coaching up is just as valuable. Now, not everybody's going to get it. We all have a different emotional intelligence. We all have the ability to receive and take in new information differently, but that doesn't mean that it should hold you back personally in advocating for yourself, feeding yourself, and still going out and finding that advisor or coach that can pour into you. So I hope that answered your question, Megan. Any other questions or thoughts or concerns? As I know we went through this super fast. I wish we were in a face-to-face workshop because we'd be doing so many breakouts and brainstorms and sharing examples with each other. But the whole intention of this is for it to be just a little bit of a piece of what we do at the Bridge activity here coming up.
You do have in the Q&A, Sarah, someone asks, what about no feedback or willingness to provide feedback from a leader?
Oh, I didn't see that one. There it is. No feedback or willingness to provide feedback. So I would want to understand why, if I can, because that's where my brain immediately went was, well, why wouldn't anyone want to give feedback? And so it may be that there's a lack of psychological safety, that they're worried if they give feedback that there's some kind of retaliation. It may be that they gave feedback at some point in time in their career and it came back to kind of haunt them, that it wasn't received well, it didn't go over well, it caused problems, and so now they're like, well, never going to do that again, right? So I'd want to understand why, if you can. Sometimes that's hard. If it's a leader above you and you want to quiz them on why won't you give me feedback, that could be an uncomfortable moment. So it may be a matter of you're having to go to get feedback elsewhere. There's just, again, that's the beauty. That's why so many organizations are going to 360, is because sometimes that leader that you really want to be watching and knowing what you're doing isn't equipped to give you feedback or isn't the right person to give you feedback. That doesn't mean there's not someone else in the organization that you're working with that sees what you're doing that can be the person who can give you some feedback. I just had another question. Do you have any information on your websites or socials for psychological safety and EQ? Great question. So I actually do a psychological safety workshop. So if that's something that you're interested in, reach out to Kirkwood Corporate Training because it's a ton of fun. It's a little bit of going down a rabbit hole. There's 5 key aspects of psychological safety and how to develop and build psychological safety in your team. And so it's a very fun workshop to do. You can certainly, I don't know that I have a thought leader or a book that I follow that really deep dives into that topic. It's a little more research oriented. Emotional intelligence, Daniel Goleman is what they consider the father of EQ. He's got a great book called Working with Emotional Intelligence. He's got several, but by the Working with Emotional Intelligence one, I think I have it behind me. Working with Emotional Intelligence is the best one because half of the book is the concept of emotional intelligence, and half of the book is how to actually implement it in your workplace and in yourself personally. His first book is all research, all science. Most people get through the first chapter and can't read the rest of it because it's a little academic. So if you're going to buy a Daniel Goleman book, by Working with Emotional Intelligence, there's a ton of podcasts and things out there to be able to kind of study what Daniel Goleman teaches, but he's really what we'd consider the father of EQ. So, well, thank you so much for letting me lean into coaching for success and kind of some of these leadership success traits, and would again appreciate the feedback. I'm going to pass it back to Megan to kind of do some of our closing activities here, but definitely enjoyed being able to share some thoughts with you today.
Thank you, Sarah. I did just launch a poll, just 4 questions, real simple yes or no's, with one asking for more. If you could please fill that out before you leave, that would be wonderful. We also wanted to share that Kirkwood as an institution has begun supporting Tanager Place and their Meraki Institute for webinars as well. So if you're interested in more professional development, I did just put the link in the chat here if you'd like to register for their website, or excuse me, their webinar coming up. Those will be monthly as well, similar to ours. Do we have any more last minute questions about Sarah, or maybe the bridge if you're interested in coming and seeing her session full and in live? I'm seeing none, but I am seeing plenty of poll results. So thank you very much for doing that. We will end it here today, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And if you think of questions after this, feel free to email corporatetraining@kirkwood.edu and we'll get those answered for you. Wonderful. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Thank you, Sarah.
Bye.